Tell me, do you bleed? Well, technically you do, but so did this movie. It bled really, really, really badly. I was originally going to review Netflix's Death Note, but to commemorate the release of Justice League, I decided to review Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice, or BVS as I will be calling it from this point on. I've been wanting to review BVS for quite some time, because I have so much to say about this movie, and none of it is good.
The red capes are coming. The red capes are coming.
But before I continue, let me make it clear that this video is not intended to bash this movie. This is not some Marvel fanboys crusade to throw shit at this movie. I want to make it absolutely clear that not only is this my personal review of BVS, but also an in-depth analysis, a visual essay, you might say, about how and why this movie failed in many aspects. This video is not a rant, but rather a review/analysis from a subjective and an informative perspective. Another thing I want to make absolutely clear is that I am a comic book fan myself. I am a fan of both Marvel and DC. I am not one of those fans who holds childish allegiances to one side and bashes the other. I love both Marvel and DC equally the same, and I really don't support this rivalry between Marvel and DC fans. And I certainly don't appreciate the fact that a few people from DC are enabling this stupid rivalry, like Jason Momoa and David Ayer with their "fuck Marvel" comments.
Fuck Marvel!
The world is already divisive as it is. Do we need to divide comic book fans as well? Anyways, with that being said, let's do this.
Let's get it on.
Let's start from the very beginning, and what I mean by that is 2013's Man of Steel. I do admit it had some major flaws, but I ended up enjoying the movie in the end. So when I heard plans for a Man of Steel sequel were scrapped in favor of a Batman vs. Superman movie, I became confused and excited at the same time. Confused because I thought they were going to give this universe's version of Batman his own solo movie before pairing him up with another DC character. And excited because, well, how can you not be excited for a movie titled Batman vs. Superman? It's Batman vs. Superman, not Batman and Superman. Although that's how the movie ended up feeling once the end credits rolled. But anyways, yeah, my nerdgasm was raising, and when they revealed that this Batman will be inspired by Frank Miller's Batman from Dark Knight Returns, my nerdgasm was already reaching its climax. Then the movie came out, and a wave of Russell Jimmies was unleashed. I do admit, there's things I do like about BVS, but then there's a lot of things I don't like about BVS. The execution. I keep reading from critics and fans various reasons why this movie failed. One person would say, oh, the dark and serious tone killed it, or no, the lack of fun killed it, or no, the runtime killed it. In my opinion, the one thing and one thing only that killed the movie was the execution. Like things in life, the execution is everything, and unfortunately for BVS, the execution was handled very poorly. It's pretty clear that everyone involved had different visions for this movie, and it seemed that Zack Snyder tried to compromise with everybody's visions. They had so many ideas that could have been saved for sequels, but instead, Snyder tried to squeeze all of those ideas into one single movie, and it just didn't work. It's like having to squeeze the Lord of the Rings trilogy into one movie. BVS introduces so many ideas and concepts and never resolves them. In fact, the movie abandons half of these ideas. For example, the movie introduces the idea about Superman's accountability for the destruction he was partially responsible for in Man of Steel. For the first half of the movie, this idea is introduced and teased, and when we finally get to it, it's literally blown away. What was the point of bringing up Superman's accountability if it was never going to be addressed properly or resolved? This is the prime example of where the filmmakers' priorities for this movie were. Their priorities were in the wrong place. The setups for Justice League. It seems to me that everyone's top priority for this movie was not to make a great film, but rather make one big setup for Justice League. In almost 3 scenes, the movie is stopped completely to dedicate 3 minutes or more to setting up Justice League. There's the nightmare sequence, the email scene, and the scene where Batman visits Lex Luthor in jail. I don't understand why 3 scenes were necessary when a post-credits scene could have sufficed. None of these scenes are relevant to the plot of BVS, so therefore, they have no business being there. Some people might argue that DC just didn't want to imitate Marvel in how they add post-credit scenes in all of their movies, yet DC ended up doing that anyway with Suicide Squad, and they'll likely keep doing that in other movies. Let's take Kong Skull Island for example. That movie is the second installment in Legendary Pictures' Monsterverse, a shared cinematic universe between Godzilla and King Kong. Kong Skull Island did not waste time dedicating multiple scenes to setting up sequels. Instead, its top priority was making a good, entertaining movie first. Kong Skull Island drops nods and hints that you don't notice at first that could be picked up in sequels. Instead of stopping the movie and dedicating multiple scenes to setting up sequels, it does all of that in a post-credits scene. This is what BVS should have done. All of these setups are absolutely unnecessary, and they are the results of poor decisions. I actually ended up creating my personal fan recut of the Ultimate Edition, which you can find in the link on the description. And I cut out a lot of unnecessary stuff, mainly the scene setting up Justice League, and you know what I discovered? My recut of the Ultimate Edition ended up running at 150 minutes. That's how long the theatrical cut runs. So DC could have had a properly, decently paced cut of the Ultimate Edition that would have ran at the same length as the theatrical cut. But no, their priorities were in the wrong place. Almost everything about this movie is a product of poor decisions. And speaking of poor decisions, the theatrical cut has so many loose ends, but the Ultimate Edition has scenes that kinda sorta resolve those loose ends, yet the filmmakers chose in favor to keep all of those setups for Justice League in the theatrical cut rather than the scenes that were important to the plot. For example, many people complained why Superman didn't save or even warn people of the bomb that was in Wally's wheelchair. In the Ultimate cut, they revealed that the wheelchair was made out of lead.
But Luthor goes through all of that trouble, creates a bomb out of a wheelchair, and then alters it to reduce the blast.
What do you mean?
The inside of the chair is lined with lead.
And if you're a fan, you'll know that Superman can't see through lead. That crucial scene was actually important to the plot, yet it was removed from the theatrical cut. Again, another poor decision. And that's another thing too. The DC Extended Universe has not even established that this Superman can't see through lead. There is no scene in BVS or Man of Steel that reveal how and why Superman can't see through lead. BVS doesn't even reveal how Lex Luthor found out Batman and Superman's secret identities. I brought this argument up before with a DC fan, how the movie doesn't address this, and the guy I was debating with said the movie doesn't need to reveal how Lex Luthor found out because fans already know he's a genius mastermind. Okay, yes, fans who are familiar with the source material know that Lex Luthor is a genius, but what about the casual moviegoer? The people who don't follow the source material? That's another poor decision on the filmmakers' part. The fact that BVS alienates general audiences and caters more exclusively to fans. This seems to have become a common defense from those involved with DC. If the movie was critically panned, the filmmakers will come out and say, oh, we made it for the fans, not the critics. Okay, I'm all for fan service. In that regard, you are actually acknowledging your supporters. However, if you cater 100% to fans only and alienate general audiences, then you're losing half of your movie-going demographic. The reason why Marvel Studios' movies are so successful is because they cater to a general audience, not just fans. And it seems like DC dropped the ball on that with BVS. Characters. In the theatrical cut, Superman gets very little screen time, but in the Ultimate Edition, he gets a decent amount of screen time. The theatrical cut removes some scenes that shows Clark Kent actually doing some journalistic research and Superman saving people, while the Ultimate Edition restores these scenes. Jesse Eisenberg delivers the weirdest, most oddball performance of Lex Luthor to date. And I don't mean that in a good way. Eisenberg's performance as Lex Luthor feels off character, almost as if he's playing the Riddler, or a poor man's version of the Joker. I understand DC's reasons for wanting to cast a younger version of Lex Luthor. The idea fits for this day and age where we have young prodigies becoming billionaires. Unfortunately for all parties concerned, they will not find that in Jesse Eisenberg's clumsy portrayal of Lex Luthor.
That'll be the cook. Excuse me. Gotham roast. Well done. Hello? Break the bad news.
I'd rather do the breaking in person.
On top of that, Lex Luthor's motivations for framing Superman make absolutely no sense. For a character who depends on logic, his reasons are just illogical. He wants to frame Superman because there was no God or Superman that saved him from child abuse?
No man in the sky intervened when I was a boy to deliver me from Daddy's fists and abominations. I figured out way back. If God is all-powerful, he cannot be all good. And if he is all good, then he cannot be all-powerful.
Gal Gadot was great as Wonder Woman, but her charismatic performance is brought down by the fact that her character is absolutely useless in this movie. Wonder Woman doesn't advance the plot of BVS, she's just another tool to set up Justice League and the Wonder Woman solo movie. It's a real shame too because Wonder Woman had so much potential for this movie. She could have been the one that stopped Batman's revenge on Superman. She could have done so much more. And speaking of Batman's revenge, the fight between Batman and Superman was disappointing. The movie is called Batman vs. Superman, yet the two characters only fought once and it lasted for a few minutes. Although I did think the fight itself was badass and well choreographed, I still found it disappointing in the end. I thought Batman and Superman were going to have multiple fight scenes sprinkled all over the movie, but no, they only had just the one fight. And speaking of Batman, without a doubt, Ben Affleck was the best thing about BVS, and it's probably the only reason why this movie has any replay value for me. Affleck plays the best movie incarnation of Batman to date. He's old, he's pissed, and he's just 100% badass. A lot of people complain how this Batman was too extreme, how he indirectly and sometimes directly kills criminals. This is how I see it. This is not the young version of Batman who was idealistic and filled with a sense of justice, like Christian Bale's Batman. This is a Batman who sees things more realistically because time has been cruel to him. In his 20 years in Gotham, he lost Robin, and apparently some allies. This is a Batman who wants to hit the criminal underworld as hard or even harder as life has hit him. And that's why I love this version of Batman. It is essentially Frank Miller's Batman, but taken to a much more extreme, crueler level. Jeremy Irons also plays my favorite version of Alfred to date. He is not just Bruce Wayne's butler, he's actually helping him with building gadgets and using the Batcave's arsenal to help find criminals. This was something that was missing in Michael Gough and Michael Caine. Also, I love the sass and attitude of this Alfred.
Go upstairs and socialize. Some young lady from Metropolis will make you honest. In your dreams, Alfred.
The introduction of Doomsday surprised me. I thought it was too early to introduce Doomsday to the DC cinematic universe. The death of Superman was also introduced too damn early. BVS is the second film in the DC extended universe, and they already killed off Superman? That makes no sense. Again, another poor decision. The runtime. Whether you're watching the theatrical cut or the Ultimate Edition, both versions run too damn long. The theatrical cut is 151 minutes, while the Ultimate Edition is 183 minutes. That's 3 hours! Because both versions run too long, BVS slowly begins to drag, and then it gets boring. Especially since the movie saves all of its hand-to-hand combat action scenes for the last 30 minutes of the movie, and especially since the movie has absolutely no humor nor any engaging characters, except for Batman. The tone. For some reason, one of the main criticisms that BVS faced was that it was too dark and too serious. Some may argue that it was the nitty-gritty dark and serious tone alone that killed the movie, hence why now Justice League has a lighter tone and filled with humor. I 100% disagree with this. The dark and serious tone was one of the things I liked about BVS, and it's actually one of the things that separates DC from Marvel. Listen, the dark and serious tone of BVS was not the issue, nor was it the sole reason why the movie failed. People seem to have forgotten that successful dark and serious superhero films have been done before. Tim Burton's Batman, Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy, and even Watchmen, which was also directed by Zack Snyder, proved that you can have a dark and serious toned superhero movie and still have it succeed. In fact, Captain America Civil War, which was released a couple months after BVS, had a similar premise with a similar serious tone, yet it still succeeded. While I do admit that BVS could have definitely benefited from some humor sprinkled across the film, I disagree that the dark and serious tone was completely to blame for the film's failure. The Martha scene. When I first saw BVS, I understood the sentimentality behind the Martha scene. This is how I interpreted it. For a good chunk of the movie, Batman saw Superman as a monster only capable of destruction. He did not stop to think that this alien may have friends and family. So when Superman revealed that his mother, Martha, needed to be saved, Batman finally humanized the monster. The fact that Superman's mother is also named Martha triggers memories of Batman's Martha being killed in cold blood. The way I initially saw it, Batman was about to indirectly have Superman's mother be killed by a monster in the same way Batman's mother was killed by a monster. This goes even further when Batman insists on rescuing Martha himself, perhaps as a spiritual way to redeem himself. Since he couldn't save his mother, he would definitely save Superman's mother. At least that's how I interpreted that scene at first. However, now that I've seen the movie a few times, the Martha scene makes it seem like Batman doesn't hate Superman anymore simply because both of their mothers share the same name. If they added a small narration from Batman's perspective saying he realized he made a mistake, then that scene would have played out differently. Overall, Batman vs. Superman was an excruciatingly okay below average movie. There are two cuts of the movie, the theatrical cut and the Ultimate Edition. Even though the Ultimate Edition runs at 3 hours, it's the better cut out of the two. Even though the Ultimate Edition resolves some loose ends from the theatrical cut, it's still plagued with its own issues. Even though the movie has major issues, I do enjoy parts of it. Like Ben Affleck as Batman, Hans Zimmer's soundtrack, though I thought his new theme for Batman sounded generic and uninspired. I even like some of the dialogue in this film, like Bruce Wayne's "Gotham is used to freaks dressed as clowns" comment, or Lex Luthor's "Tyrants and Daisies" story, or the "bucket of piss" comment. There is some great dialogue here and there. I hate the fact that a lot of DC fanboys defend this movie to death, even some going as far as to calling it a masterpiece. Look, I like BVS, but it's plagued with some major flaws. Even though I like it, I cannot bring myself to call it a masterpiece at all. The Dark Knight was a masterpiece. Watchmen was an even better masterpiece than BVS. Still, this movie had to fail in order for DC to finally realize that their methods are not working, and they're making steps in the right direction so that the DCEU can finally have some ground to stand on. It's a shame that BVS failed on so many levels because it had the potential to tell the greatest Batman vs. Superman story of all times. But it's just like Russell Crowe said in Man of Steel. They will stumble, they will fall, but in time, they will join you in the sun. I award BVS 2 stars out of 4.